They were gnats, buzzing and biting, but unable to do any significant damage to her fleet, even spread out as they were. She had expected to be done with them quickly. Rolla had expected wrongly, a fact she hated to recognize as she watched the fighting drag on longer and longer. The enemy battle groups were badly mauled, most of their ships burning in space, but not all, and no one group had been completely vanquished. Every one of the enemy attack formations taking severe but dispersed casualties. "Damn it, I made a mistake," she growled to herself. "Order the fleet to fall back to our position. Have our ships ignore the enemy for now, and hope it's not too late," the Lord Admiral yelled more loudly.
"What do you mean by a mistake? We are destroying them with minimal losses,"
said her guard captain, Alvet standing dutifully to the left of her throne. "I ordered our forces to mop up their local clusters before regrouping, but it looks like we should have simply been regrouping all along. I thought we would run through a force of their size more quickly, but they aren't aiming to damage us. They're stalling. They were always stalling, and I underestimated how successful they would be," the Lord Admiral admitted through a scrunched face, looking as though she were gagging on something sour. The great green hololith before her shone in flickering emerald light, displaying her forces gradually beginning to contract in her direction. Many more slowly than they otherwise would, thanks to the damage done to their engines and maneuvering thrusters. Rolla grit her white synthetic teeth as she saw the Republic punish the late maneuver by destroying several of her weakened escort ships. Though she was at least somewhat relieved to see that the losses to her cruisers of all classes and higher were minimal, almost non-existent even now. Her own Oberon-class battleship was currently circling and dueling with the second massive dreadnought of the Republic Navy, the lettering on this one naming it the Pillar of Order. It earned its name well, much to her frustration, its shields holding strong even after repeated weapons volleys from her own craft. The captain of this ship had learned well the lessons of its broken contemporary, and had sliced in close with his cumbersome vessel, and thus begun to orbit Rolla's ship, carefully dancing with her to keep himself and his crew out of any angle which could involve a direct ramming maneuver. They spun around each other like two massive beasts, chasing the tail of their opponent as their applicable weapons turrets lobbed smoking death and luminous fire into each other's shields. Neither was having any immediate luck penetrating the defense of the enemy ship, the massively powerful shields of the Mandator repelling the Oberon's varied weapons fire, showing that their own issue was nearly the same, yet perfectly inverted. The Mandator's own particle energy weapons were having great difficulty of their own as they attempted to penetrate the void-based shields which had enveloped the price of dignity. Shields which one of their own vessels had witlessly empowered. Rolla grit her teeth even more tightly. She did not have time for a protracted duel against such a thickly shielded foe. And though she was loath to deploy her astropaths again, she found she had little choice. Her choir of telepathic psychers had been specially trained and conditioned to extend their minds offensively towards the foe. A tactic which worked wonderfully against orcs, common pirates, and greatly splintered or isolated fragments of the Tyranid hive fleets. Even so, the act was one she did not employ lightly, as not only was it severely taxing on those vital minds, but by exposing her choir in the form of an attack, she risked exposing her vessel to dangers generally far more vast than those posed by enemy ships. It salved her nerves somewhat that this new galaxy's Sea of Souls seemed to have an almost disturbingly calm demeanor about its wake and currents, and that the Republic vessels appeared to have next to no psychic defenses as she made her next orders heard. "Instruct the choir to cease their singing and begin their screaming once more. We must bring their shields down before the rest of the Republic Armada arrives," she ordered, staring hatefully into the glowing, flickering sphere of power which surrounded the large, vaguely arrowhead-shaped vessel they were contending with. Lord Admiral Rolla's eyes then flicked over to the larger hololith which was depicting her forces, slowly closing in. She bit her lip, an unconscious gesture the Admiral barely felt.
Lord Admiral, calm yourself,
Alvet said from her side.
We are winning. These Republic ships won't last another 10 minutes at this rate,
he added. She shook her head. If only we had 10 minutes left. I should have been using all of this time to withdraw our fleet. Regroup, Rolla said, the lines across her face deepening as her scowl intensified. They spoiled me with their last engagement. The only vessels from the Republic's side that have ever shown this kind of ingenuity was that cluster of 6 or 7 ships we novaed at the end of our first battle. Maybe we were not as thorough as I had imagined. The venerable Admiral grumbled, factoring in everything the enemy was now revealing to her.
Still, I don't think things are as dire as you seem to think. If the Republic Armada does return quickly, they will arrive near where they left. They won't be able to come to the aid of these ambush vessels quickly enough to save them.
The guard captain contested. That would be true if they were going to come back at us from the same direction and angle, but I strongly suspect that is not the case. The Armada is repositioning itself to come in at the Lagrange points we are virtually on top of. Captain, you may be unaware, but the Republic's FTL drives move far faster than our warp drives. It will not take them hours to return to this system. On top of these very jump points, it will only take them minutes, Rolla revealed.
They are that much faster?
Alvet almost sputtered, Rolla nodding grimly. We captured several of their ships during the first battle. The tech priests and tempered hands space marines have been dismantling them and reviewing all data within their computers for weeks. Specifics are unconfirmed, but the possible ranges they showed me during our briefings were not good. At most, it will take them 50 standard minutes, she said to her guard captain.
And what's the worst case scenario? How fast can they be here in the shortest estimate?
He asked her. Rolla shook her head and scowled at the displays before her more viciously. We are running out of time, she growled before sighing heavily and turning towards her communications officer. Signal the death of Defiance. Tell them they are clear to use the fusion cannon. The captain leaned forward while sitting in his command chair, unused to being seated while giving orders, but forgetting his discomfort as a new revelation took its place. The hologram before his eyes played out, revealing what had occurred on the very sister ship of his own vessel, the Pillar of Order. His eyes reflected the images of figures of the bridge crew of the Pride of the Corps, going mad and killing each other, killing themselves. And then it was gone, crushed. Gilad swallowed hard and looked up as the hologram reformed into the shape of Admiral Spikes, the helmed clone standing, his hands behind his back. The hologram was flickering and unstable, and a commotion was clearly kicking up around the Admiral as he fought for his life in his much smaller Victory-class Star Destroyer. I am engaging the Imperial flagship even as we speak. How by the many moons are we supposed to defend ourselves from that kind of weapon? Losing the Pride was bad enough. Fleet morale won't hold if we suffer that kind of loss twice in such a short amount of time, the captain said, keeping his composure but stating plainly their dilemma. I agree. Listen very carefully, Captain, and do exactly as I order. First, have your bridge and security crews move between all personnel present and confiscate any and all weapons or tools which could be used as weapons. Have them deposit these things outside the bridge, and make sure they all leave their own weapons behind as well. If they need to subdue someone, they will have to make do with their hands and binder cuffs. Second, have medical crews prepped and ready to enter the bridge to retrieve the wounded. Have them all leave their medical supplies outside the bridge. They can bring nothing that they can then use as weapons themselves. The primary objective will be to remove the wounded and those who are possessed but pacified, and then administer care and sedatives once their patient is outside of the command area and not before. And thirdly, call up the secondary and tertiary bridge crews and have them wait nearby at the ready. You will lose men if they attack you this way, and you will need people to replace them as soon as possible. If your shields fail, if your trajectory veers, it could be the end of the pillar. Do whatever else you think you need to in order to ensure your ship's security. But you must enact the protocols I've just described. Is that understood, Captain? Admiral Spikes concluded. Gilad nodded his head rapidly, already instructing his men to carry out the first step as his fingers tapped away at the keyboard built into his chair, sending notifications and orders to the medical crews and the other bridge officers. Understood, Admiral. We'll hold out here for as long as we can, he said in response, saluting stiffly. Good. Fight well, Captain Pelion, answered Spikes. The clone admiral saluted back to the young captain, and the image winked out. Gilad broke his rigid posture and turned his attention back to the battle. He had seen what had occurred with the Pride, and had moved immediately to take its place engaging the Imperial flagship, knowing that this would serve several functions, not the least of which was salvaging what momentum they could from their own ambush. Directing the ship with a forward tact, Captain Gilad Pelion guided the pillar in with a careful eye for ramming trajectories, falling into a stable orbit with the flagship. It gave chase, but despite its own massive engines, could not outpace the Mandator II, or at least not by enough to make a large enough difference in their continuing contest. Despite that, however, Pelion saw that it was a contest the Imps would eventually win. The weapons his vessel had to fight back with were paltry when compared to what the Imperial ship was throwing against their powerful shields. And he knew, in a contest of endurance, the Pillar of Order would ultimately fail without the introduction of some mitigating factor. Luckily, he did not need to win, only to hold, and that he was accomplishing well enough. Helmsman, begin a wide-sleeve rotary maneuver. Weapons, charge aft batteries for immediate volleys on my mark. Prep the engineering and medical teams. As soon as we turn about, I want them addressing the damage and the wounded on and near our struck turbo laser batteries. When it comes time to come about once more, I want those weapons and crews ready to resume focused fire. Captain Pelion ordered from his command chair. Aye, sir! Called back the mixture of clone and corporate bridge officers which attended to the ship's systems. Angle the shields as we turn. Keep the Imperials behind the thickest segments. Missile batteries, you may fire when ready, he added, watching the men and women under his command act fluidly to enact his will, all but the officer manning the missile guidance system, who did not react at all to the orders. Captain Pelion noticed him immediately and eyed him cautiously, the clone's hands twitching and flexing without lowering over the controls, his eyes bulging wide as bloodshot veins began to streak across them. Gilad reached down slowly and compressed the comms button on his command chair, selecting the first of the readied medical teams from the quick list of contacts. Medical extraction team, be prepared to... he began to say, still watching the twitching clone when suddenly someone else released an ear-piercing shriek. His head spun around towards the shield operator, a human corporate officer named Pencillus, who was reaching up even then, taking great fistfuls of his own blonde hair and tearing patches of it out. His brown, bloodshot eyes rolling, his mouth foaming as he screamed. The corporate officer reached for the controls, grabbing as many knobs and levers as he could close his two hands around, before being tackled out of his chair by a pair of security officers. They bore the scrambling, howling human to the ground, wrestling him into a pair of binder cuffs, even as he tried to force-feed them the portions of his control console he had managed to rip out. Gilad felt a pale chill spike through him as he saw the screen on the shield console flicker, its controls broken and sparking. He jammed his finger against another of his quick contacts and began to speak. Get the secondary shield operator in here now! Medical crew, one for sedation! He barked, watching as, shortly thereafter, the requested personnel stormed onto the bridge, wasting no time in dragging the maddened man away. The newest shield operator arrived to replace Pencillus only a moment later, the young Bothan officer going to work right away. Suddenly, Pelion remembered the clone from before and looked back, only to see two security officers approaching his now still and slumped form. His eyes open and colored red and white, blood running from his nose and onto his controls. The captain sighed heavily. "Get the missile navigations officer in here as well, along with another medical crew," he said before turning back to the short, alien officer who now manned the shield console. "Well, what is the status of the shields?" he asked. The Bothan shook his head in obvious dismay, turning to face Pelion with wide, watery eyes. "The controls are damaged, sir. I cannot affect anything. Screens show the shields are up, but angled. I cannot continue to tilt them without turn if I cannot access the controls." The third alien yelled. Pelion felt his skin chill all across his body, but did not wait for the feeling to subside before taking action. "Damn it! Cease all previous orders! Keep us on our current tilt! Do not let our angle shift out of our current shield facing!" The captain ordered, the crew panicking to keep up with his sudden shifting commands. All the while, more of them fell. The primary weapons officer suddenly went rigid before leaping onto the ensign beside him, beginning to beat him with his fists until security personnel arrived to pull him off. One of the guards who was not engaged suddenly gave a demented shout, speaking in the Imperial language, his face contorting into a hideous grin under his helmet before he took off at a full sprint and ran face first into one of the nearby walls, clawing and scratching at it as though he could dig a tunnel through the durasteel. "Captain, we can't maintain this tilt and avoid a potential ramming action. We have to choose," one of the helmsmen called. Pelion's brain frenzied behind his eyes, neurons cracking and snapping as he tried to see a way through. He would be damned if he allowed these Imperial savages to force him into another ultimatum. "Like hell we do! We can buy ourselves some time with a corkscrew maneuver," he declared. "Corkscrew? In a ship this wide?" the helmsman said in disbelief. "You heard me right. A wide corkscrew. It will tax the engines and thrusters to their limits, but we have no choice but to try. Helm! Prepare to take the following degree changes," the captain shouted, relaying his instructions in staggered fashion as he studied their current trajectory. "Brace!" he yelled as the crew did as he instructed, the ship suddenly jerking, G-forces increasing rapidly as they executed the difficult maneuver. The engines and thrusters all across the monolithic, triangular slab of steel burned bright hot, their counterparts on the Imperial vessel heating up to match them as the two enormous ships began to spiral through space, each trying to outmaneuver the other in a chaotic, dance-like duel of bright blaster flashes and burning lance and macro cannon volleys. It bought them time, but nothing else. "Sir, we need to repair this console," the Bothan insisted, and Captain Pelion's young face grew stretched and furrowed as he considered what he might do. "I cannot just call a maintenance crew in here. Those tools could quickly be used to kill us all," the captain asserted, speaking as yet another member of the crew fell over dead, blood spurting from his nose. "By the fragging moons of Iago, it's like trying to command a battleship while under artillery fire," Pelion yelled, tossing his hands up in frustration. The Bothan nodded nervously, eyes darting as though he might spot the next incoming salvo. "Yeah, except that they're aiming for our minds and not our bodies. How do you armor a mind against this?" the officer said. "You'd have to be a Jedi, or have no mind at all." "Wait, no mind at all? That's it!" Gilad exclaimed. "That's what, sir?" asked the Bothan officer. Pelion was already typing his command into the console in his armrest, even as the man asked. "The gamble I'm willing to take to get this console fixed. Stand by, Officer... Pelion began to say. Officer Towens, sir. He responded with a salute. Stand by, Officer Towens. I'm hoping to have your console operational shortly, said the captain, and right on cue, a group of 4 astromech droids rolled onto the bridge. They drove up to the console without delay and unfurled their many tools and implements, beginning to work and watched closely by both Pelion and several security officers as they did. But, to Pelion's relief, none of them seemed susceptible to the psychic attacks. Unlike the 3 final casualties Pelion was forced to report in for extraction and replacement. None more so than the final one. The other 2 he had reported after they were spotted by his security teams, one dying at his controls, the other going mad, his hands scrambling over his belt, tearing at his empty weapons holster before being wrestled down. The final one, however, Pelion noticed before anyone else did. He felt a pressure, almost like the one which came with a drug-induced high, building behind his eyes. At first he barely noticed it, but it swiftly grew more pronounced. He felt the muscles in his neck beginning to stiffen, and looked down at his right hand, and saw a subtle twitching beginning to tremble the ends of his fingers. He grit his teeth and looked up. Just as the astromech droids finished installing the new console inputs, Officer Towens quickly manning his station. Shield controls re-established. I can now continue to angle the shields with our movement, he declared triumphantly. Good. You are all doing very well. Hold the line until the rest of the Navy arrives. Victory is almost ours. I believe in you all, said the captain, feeling a sudden vertigo taking him as he spoke. Sir? Asked one of his security officers. In response, Pelion pressed the comms key again and spoke. Medical crew, 1 for extraction. Secondary captain to the bridge. He breathed out tremulously before standing and saluting, his whole arm quaking and jerking, his security officers slowly beginning to understand. He turned and began to walk on legs which trembled more and more, moving unsteadily but determinedly toward the back of the bridge. Yet, in spite of his grit, Captain Gilad Pelion only made it halfway to the exit before the doors opened and the requested crew rushed in. They arrived just in time to see their captain fall and begin to convulse upon the ground. Blood spurting from his nose and mouth as a horrific, rending seizure took hold of him. Captain Screed chafed at the orders being delivered to him, but saluted and nodded his head regardless. How on earth had they allowed a clone, any clone, to achieve the rank of Admiral? He quickly did as he was instructed to, ordering the proper teams into place, and only reluctantly releasing his own sidearm to the guard who was collecting them. His combat group, headed by his own massive Mandator II, the Bulwark of Duro, had taken the most losses so far, but had also dealt the most damage in return. Screed did not waste himself drawing the attention of the larger enemy ships, at least not through direct engagement. The Mandators were glorious, but they were only a shell of what they could truly be once entirely released from the hideous constraints of the Ruusan reformations. Viewing the weapons and tactics of their new enemies, he had no doubt that the Senate would soon lose their taste for tradition and quickly begin to lessen the constraints, or at least ignore any violations their fighting forces perpetrated so long as victory was achieved. But all of that was for the future, and Screed needed to keep his mind directly in the present. A present in which he was fully aware of the fact that he could not harm the largest of the enemy cruisers and battleships conventionally. And so, the captain did not even try to, instead instructing the ships of his battle group to harry the largest and most dangerous Imperial cruisers, while he used the massive firepower mounted onto his own battleship to chase down and destroy the smaller escort vessels of the Imperium. succeeding in quickly eliminating several, even while under fire. The near planetary level of their incredibly powerful shield systems made use of all of the energy that should have gone into proportionally sized weapons. But Screed scorned them less and less as he continued to benefit from their aegis. However, Screed also knew that the more successful he was with his big fish, small fish tactic, the more likely he was to draw unwanted attention. That attention revealed itself in the form of a massive and undeniably odd battleship which came upon them from on high as they chased down a small cluster of burning escort ships.
Captain, an Imperial battleship is approaching. It's just as large as we are, sir. Even larger vertically.
Called one of the sensors officers from his station, a corporate uniform denoting him as a part of the Kuat Corporation.
Ignore it! Comms! Call up some squadrons and have a dozen victory classes drop in on it and distract it. Keep pursuing those ships!
Screed ordered, eyeing the sensor reports which were projected to him and keeping an eye on the enormous vessel as it came closer. All across the battle around them, both above and below, Republic ships began to disengage from their desperate struggles, leaving their comrades to pick up their slack. The bladed arrowheads of the several Victory-class Star Destroyers which had been called upon smoothly curved away in wide arches. Red and silver hulls slicing through space as they angled their points towards their new target. They opened fire on the enormous Imperial cruiser, focusing on its maneuvering thrusters and engines, and in doing so, discovered even more oddities about the ship.
Sir, the attacking victories are reporting that the vessel is not shielded. I repeat, the enemy ship has no shields at all. Every shot is impacting upon the hull,
reported the comms operator.
What? Then that means that battleship is vulnerable. Disengage! Disengage! We are going after a bigger target. Pull us about!
Screed ordered, unable to help but stand as a fire lit itself in his gut, his artificial eye adjusting its lens as he moved so suddenly. The vast, humpbacked vessel began its own turn, sweeping wide to face the oncoming foe, who approached steadily, itself ignoring the other ships which surrounded and fired upon it. It did not slow, veer, or even seem to bleed as it returned fire at the vessels, pestering it with its own broadside guns.
Hurry! Full engine thrust towards the battleship! I want to get into effective weapons range before those victory classes tear it up too much!
Screed ordered as the distant burning shape of the approaching battleship swung into distant view of his thick forward port windows. At its fore was an absolutely massive weapon of some kind. A cannon which seemed to stretch across the length of the entire keel of the 8-kilometer-long vessel. The armament was so large that Screed did not immediately recognize it for what it was. And even once he did, he could not believe that the entire length of the thing was actually used as some kind of effective weapon. Even more noticeably, at least to Screed, was the utter lack of damage it was suffering, despite the now prolonged exposure to the assault which surrounded it. The vessel was passively defending itself by firing at whatever ship came into sight of their guns as they flew, but it otherwise made no attempt to address the attackers. And why should it? Despite evidently lacking shields, the ship was taking the rain of fire which surrounded it without any noticeable hindrance. Whereas before, Screed had been worried that they would be unable to reach the Imperial vessel in time to claim the kill, now he was starting to worry whether or not he even had the firepower to take it on alone.
Sensors operator, get me a deep scan of that approaching enemy vessel. Coordinate your efforts with the Victory-class Star Destroyers which are surrounding it. I want deep scans, both energetic and material. I want to know whether they actually have no shields, or if they simply have no shields we can easily detect. The captain ordered as he sat back into his command chair and stroked his naked chin.
glaring with his human and machine eye at the oncoming warship. Minutes later, the results were in, and his human eye bulged in response.
Captain, you're not going to believe these readings, but...
The corporate officer muttered as he looked down into his console displays.
Spit it out! I don't have time to disbelieve! Tell me what we are flying into, now!
Screed barked, the officer nodding immediately and proceeding with his report.
Yes, sir! Deep material scans are implying that... there must be some mistake. The scans are implying that 86% of that vessel is composed of forged Beskar metal,
he said. Not only Captain Screed himself, but the whole bridge were stunned at the revelation. Screed turned his eye back on the Imperial ship, watching as the vessels around it fired into it. Their massive particle bolts bouncing off the iron skin of the Imperial Dreadnought as surely as regular blaster bolts would bounce off the plates of a Mandalorian super commando.
Mandalorian iron? You are saying that ship is a giant slab of Mandalorian iron?
The captain bellowed.
That's not all, sir.
The officer continued.
Energy scans have confirmed that the ship is unshielded, but they have revealed something else. The ship has some kind of enormous centralized power source, and the readings coming off of it are intensifying. It's charging something,
the corporate man reported.
Show me,
ordered Captain Screed, and shortly after he spoke, a corresponding hologram was projected before his chair. There he could see the length of the ship cast in blue light, its internals lit up with greens, oranges, and reds. The colors denoting the locations where the power was gathering, and by how much. Most of the ship's power was gathering at the back end of its form, near the engines. Or at least, so it seemed, if one ignored the massive underslung weapon it bore. Screed felt his teeth beginning to gnash as he realized that the power was gathering at the base of the gargantuan cannon.
It's a dark mirror. Completely inverted,
Screed muttered, face sour.
Sir?
Asked his first officer, who stood to his right, having just barely heard the words, but Captain Screed did not elaborate. In his mind, it should have been obvious. Here he was in a ship where most of its power had been dedicated to defense, to its advanced shielding systems. There was his enemy, in a ship where the majority of its power was not dedicated towards shields, but instead into its main weapon. He wished he could say that made them equal, but some of his power did need to go into his weapon systems, whereas none of their power was going into their Beskar armor. What would happen when the two collided?
Should we veer off, sir?
His first officer asked, speaking again.
With a ship this broad?
Screed snapped at the clone.
No, we cannot avoid coming into their combat range now, and trying to turn off will only make us a larger, easier target. We need to keep our profile slim and angle ourselves off their central approach. If we can take that shot on the wing or avoid it altogether, then we should. Cease all fire! Draw all power to the shields! Once we are behind that thing, then we can resume the offensive.
The captain ordered, his crew following after his direction obediently. Both ships rumbled through the void of space, engines quaking the vacuum as they approached each other at maximum reckless speed, gathering velocity all the while. Light began to shine from the mouth of the encroaching Imperial weapon, and alarms began to sound across the internal space of the Victory-class vessels which surrounded it. Radiation flooded the void between the warship and its pursuers, making their shields glow blue and green against the invisible waves of energetic particles. The two dreadnoughts were now easily within range of each other, but neither fired, at least not yet.
Captain, the enemy will engage us soon. It will happen any second. There is no way they can keep building up power like that otherwise.
The sensors officer called out.
Begin veering, now! Slide out of their center!
Screed roared, and just in time.
The humped-back arrowhead shape of the bulwark of Duro swung, cutting its main engines and firing all of its retro thrusters, using its forward momentum to attempt to slide past the Imperial vessel as they did. An instant later, the Imperial warship opened fire. Captain Screed had been expecting a discharged projectile, or perhaps a powerful beam or bolt of energetic mass. He was unprepared for the actual manifestation the attack took on, and the damage it would cause to everything and everyone beyond its muzzle. The vacuum of space was filled with brilliant white light as an unthinkably enormous gout of hyper-agitated particles surged out from the barrel of the nearly 8-kilometer-long fusion cannon. The wave struck the shields of the bulwark of Duro like the weaponized blast of a star's coronal mass ejection. Radiation, heat, and fissile matter caught between mass and energy, shredding through the vaunted Kuati shields. The entire right half of the bulwark was completely vaporized, slicing through and devastating the hull of the ship in the same way an unstable lightsaber blade of colossal size might. What was left of the vessel spun away, entirely out of control as it tumbled through space, colliding with 3 escorts and 2 star destroyers in the process, crushing them all. But that was not even close to where the damage ended for the Republic. The enormous fusion discharge widened like a funnel as it spread out, dissipating and glowing weaker as it did, yet still managing to reach and destroy a vast slice of Screed's battle formations. A few Imperial ships also perishing in the blast. 2 large asteroids which had been lingering in the stable gravity of the Lagrange points, each in excess of 20 kilometers, were struck and blown into radioactive fragments, spreading across to strike even more vessels, Republic and Imperial both. Screed lost consciousness during the attack, but awoke seconds later, groaning as he found himself sprawled out across the floor of his command bridge. Vision blurry in both eyes, ears ringing, he gradually began to push himself up amidst the bleeding screams of multiple alarms, sparks raining down and around him from broken lights and burst conduits and cables. He crawled back to his command chair, feeling his entire body aching and stinging as though he had woken with an intense sunburn coating the entirety of his skin. His mechanical eye, flickering and fuzzing with static, still managed to inform him of what was happening to his body, a warning blinking into his vision. Lethal radiation spike detected was what it read as, and Screed knew from the various sensations slowly assaulting him that it must be true. His muscles twitched, and the metal in his face ached horrifically, as though his implants were about to burn their way out of him. But he choked back the pain, pulling himself into the chair and opening a panel on its left side. Uncoordinated fingers fumbled and struggled briefly before succeeding in pulling out a cylindrical medical kit from the compartment, the captain opening it and searching through its contents until he located the anti-radiation pills. He tore the entire package open and spilled the pills into a heap on his wide, swollen palm before stuffing them all into his mouth. Panting, gagging on the medicine, he wiped his mouth with his sleeve, ignoring the blood smeared there and looking at the flickering, waving controls of his chair. He reached down and pressed upon the key which denoted the ship-wide comm.
This is Captain Terranhol's Screed. All hands, abandon ship.
He gasped through his dry throat, slumping into his chair afterwards. The speakers mounted across the breadth of the enormous warship echoed his faltering words to the surviving crew, though the speakers notably delayed for a moment before repeating his words, allowing Screed to fully hear how terrible he sounded. The bridge crew around him were groaning, waking, many crawling pointlessly, dazed, confused, several vomiting shortly after regaining consciousness. Sores, blisters, and bleeding rashes began to appear across the exposed skin of all those the captain could see. And, lifting his own calloused hands before his eyes, he saw that he too was suffering similarly. His vision in his robotic eye was returning to normal slowly, while the sight in his remaining organic eye only continued to blur, blood vessels within bleeding and filling the whites with red. He felt all his strength leaving him as a deep, alien ache began to settle into his bones, into the core of his body. Still, he did manage to see the medical crews that his clone admiral had made him prepare, their bodies and faces covered completely in white radiation suits as they stormed onto the bridge and began to pull the crew out and away, beginning with their captain.
Hey there everybody, fan with too much time here, coming at you again with another in-between video with some Q&As and updates. First things first, I have some special news for everyone who decided to support me over the last few weeks. The Kickstarter is fully funded! And not only that, but we've reached 2 of our stretch goals so far. That's right, the 500 and 1000 stretch goal have been reached. What does this mean, you might ask? Let me tell you. Now included in each order of the Red Hunt is the Monsters of the Red Hunt art book. It's like the mini Monstorum, but not so mini anymore, and all about the Red Hunt. All yours, thanks to this stretch goal being reached. Thank you. Not only that, but because the $1,000 goal was reached, that means that a print of the Hidestalker comes free with each order. And if you have not yet purchased an issue of the comic, but want in on some of these special treats we're earning, go ahead and go on to the Kickstarter in the description down below. We're going for all of those reach goals if we can get them. Every little bit is more for me and more for you. And it goes without saying that I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for helping make this happen. It is a fucking dream come true. To everyone and anyone who donated to this, thank you. You are the dream makers, and I am honored to be blessed by you. Thank you. Now, with that said and done, let's move on to some Discord matters. That's right, Secret God wants you to be a moderator. Go ahead and contact Secret God on the Discord in the description down below if you'd like to take on the role of moderator inside of, well, my Discord. It's up to you. It's a big responsibility, but if you think you're up for it, the job is there. And now, lastly, the Q&As. Now, ahead of time, let me say this. Forgive me if I'm not keeping these in a specific order, and you have my permission to repost your Q&As as much as you want unless I tell you to stop, because it's hard for me to remember where I left off and where I moved on from, so I'm just going to start where I think I should. Forgive me if I skipped you. Go ahead and put it back in. I'll get to you eventually, or I'll eventually tell you to stop, I guess. But one or the other, no problem here. So, first question is from Logan. Q&A. Since it probably won't be covered by the story proper, how do Imperial fighters and spacecraft size up against their Star Wars equivalents? Keep watching, Logan. Next question is from Asmodai. Q&A. How many systems and or worlds does the Imperium control since they arrived? Did they establish a solid foothold? And did the Forge world start building and preparing for future wars? Yes, but more on that later in the series. But you're on the right track, for sure. And trust me, Orion's not sitting around without laying roots down. He needs that logistics system like any good Ultramarine does. Next question is from NFKR. Q&A. Will we begin to see more clones fall to chaos? And perhaps the other Chaos Gods later on? Those are spoilers. You have to keep watching to find out. JL. Q&A. Ooh, there's quite a few of them on here. Let me see. I'm gonna do them rapid fire. Will we get to see more Samael? Yes. Will we get to see Padawan Gaffin again? Well, maybe. Or maybe you'll just see what's left of him. What are your intentions regarding showing the good side of the Imperium of Man? I'm not quite sure what you mean by what my intentions are, showing the good side of the Imperium of Man. The good side of the Imperium of Man, insofar as it's been preserved in the lore, is basically just that they enable mankind to survive. A concept that is being more and more eroded away as factions like the Tau and the Leagues of Votan prove they can exist harmoniously with a lot of really advanced life-saving technology, which is a real... I hope they address that in the lore, otherwise it's becoming to be the case that the Imperium of Man really is just the flat-out bad guys, given that they are so unnecessarily cruel at every turn. That wouldn't be good, but insofar as the good side of the Imperium of Man, there are good people in the Empire that have to exist in these situations, but the Imperium of Man is largely a structure composed of, what people think are needed to survive, and things like human rights and things are not really considered or thought on because we simply aren't in a place where people can have them preserved above the general safety of everybody in the galaxy, or rather in the Imperium. At least this was the way that it used to be more predominantly portrayed. Now it's not so much, it's drifting away, and we'll see how that turns out. Now then, forgive me GL, but I'm gonna have to stop right there because you have quite a few, and I need to move along to other people with questions. So, moving along. Road 97, Q&A. Will the Republic resort to using more kinetic-based weapons to break void shields of the Imperium warships and vehicles? Spoilers, but you'll see what technologies and different weapon systems they adopt as they intensify their war effort. Hatter the Proud Heretic asks, Q&A. When will we see romance arc between Skywatch Chapter Master and Lord Admiral? You are a heretic, aren't you? And this will be the last one I answer for today. From Fabius Bill, Q&A. What exactly have the Space Marines been up to? Are there none stationed around Axum or near it? The lack of any Astartes involvement beyond a sole librarian left to guard a single ship leads me to believe that the Republic may be in for a rude awakening once there is a whole scattered fleet of Space Marine forces, exterminating planets in the heart of their space. Well, spoilers, but stay tuned. You will see where the Space Marines are. They will make themselves known in due time. Alright then, with that all said and done, I think it's time we get back to the video. I hope you got a snack, got some water, because here is the rest of the episode. Enjoy.
Plo Koon and his attack force of several hundred Jedi starfighters had taken only a relatively short time to disable most of the maneuvering thrusters and engine stacks on the ship they were sent to distract. Their swift vessels among the fastest and most compact in the galaxy. This proved a near-terminal hindrance for the point defenses on board the escort craft. Their targets being smaller even than the alien Eldar vessels that the Imperials were more accustomed to fighting. Jedi precognition was a game changer when it came to the insane speeds of starfighters, and among the many talented pilots of the Order, few could match Master Plo. The escort was soon limping away, and then tearing open an FTL portal to escape through, freeing up Plo and his forces to distract the other ships as well, guarding Mace Windu and his retreating boarding pods as they made their way to the battle below. They had been well on the way to immobilizing the two remaining ships when suddenly a sense of sudden dread struck the Jedi in the attack force. Moments later, the Imperial battle fleet emerged, bringing with it thousands upon thousands of wings of strike craft. Wisely, the Jedi had retreated before the ships had even arrived, hiding in the shadow of Axum's moons, engines idling and silent as they observed the newly arrived enemy. taking the measure of their actions and realizing that the Imperial battle fleet had arrived in response to an armada sent by the Republic. One which had already arrived, though distantly, at the opposite end of the system. The Jedi sat in their dark, cooling ships, watching the fleets begin to approach one another. The Imperials separating and positioning themselves to inflict maximum range damage upon their encroaching Republic counterparts. "They are venturing into butchery," said Master Thome, speaking to his fellow Jedi telepathically through the mind link Master Plo Koon was supporting. "Then we should not remain here. We must act," said Jedi Knight Ventrala, her fists tightening over her yet inert controls.
"Patience, Kira. All may not be as it seems,"
said Master Plo Koon, speaking calmly through their link and helping to soothe her with his own stalwart presence. And just as Plo Koon had predicted, the Republic did not march into a massacre, but rather lured the Empire into a trap. Their main force departing as a secondary force arrived, pinning the spread Imperials and negating their range advantage completely.
"Now is the moment we have been waiting for. Jedi Knights, spread out among the battle and aid the clones however you can. Spread what we have learned in our battles to the other squadrons and lead them to victory. For the Order and the Republic,"
declared the alien Jedi Master, the other knights roaring affirmations of their own through their mind links to Master Plo Koon before reactivating their ships, engines flaring to life. The Jedi set off at a blistering speed in their Actus II interceptors, whipping through space at velocities which would have blacked out regular pilots, the Force sustaining them as they spread out across the fleet and began to do as Master Plo had bid them to, greatly aiding the clone starfighters in their own battles and objectives. But, as Plo Koon himself soon learned, most of those objectives consisted mainly of moment-to-moment survival and little else. It was not the many enormous weapons which now threatened the thousands of Republic starfighters, which sped in and around the attacking ships, nor was it even the many dedicated anti-strike craft turrets which covered most of the Imperial vessels like spines. Tens of thousands of Imperial strike craft had been deployed, flying in wide wing formations, trailing fire and smoke as their combustion engines propelled them savagely through space. They fell upon the Republic attack formations with rapacious aggression, their oversized weapons issuing raw, brutal death towards anything they could track down and shoot. But, despite being outnumbered by the masses of Imperial craft, the Republic was not without its own advantages, which Master Plo flexed to the limit as he cut his way into one of the Imperial strike wings. The organized V of enemy vessels was rocketing forward at a reckless speed, to be certain, far faster and burning brighter than nearly any of the individual warrior cultures and separatist allies which the clones had been facing in the war. But they were still far slower than the specialized droid starfighters that the Confederacy had created to counter the Republic. And the fleeing Arc-Wing fighters were faster, more maneuverable, and even smaller. The six-winged, three-man crewed starfighters were considered large for their class of ship, but they were barely half the size of the vessels chasing after them. The smallest of them was as large as a LAT vehicle lifter with a full load, and the largest were the size of YT freighters. Plo Koon turned that size against them, strafing in from up and to the right, cutting diagonally across the formation with his blaster and ion cannons. To the credit of the Imperial pilots, they reacted quickly, splitting and banking away like birds shaken from a branch, each one of the 100 or so craft which remained in the wing turning their focus on the Jedi. The weapons on their ships were massive, as was the tendency among Imperial designs, with far more variety and firepower than any droid starfighter had ever brought to bear. These weapons proved devastating against Republic frigates, freighters, and even some of the slower starfighters, who relied more on their shields than the nimbleness of their craft to survive. However, to pilots like Plo, the only difference this made was a beneficial one. His Actis was unshielded, already a glass cannon in every sense of the word, and on the battlefield, there were no other starships which could keep pace with it from either side. Against the impossible maneuverability, blistering speed, heavy firepower, and precognitive skill of Plo Koon, the Imperial pilots stood no chance. The common voidsmen among them could not hope to keep pace with Plo, taxing their engines and spending their payloads in vain attempts to catch the flickering, tiny shape of his starfighter. The ace crews found themselves likewise impeded, but not only by the actual target himself, but by the less skilled pilots who were also giving chase. The Jedi maneuvering and even hiding behind the floundering, confounded forms of the greener strike craft, making clear shots on him all but impossible. He wore through and between them like a needle, his ship smaller and even more maneuverable than those commonly deployed by the Eldar pirates of their home galaxy. The Republic's own attack craft making use of advanced ion engines as well as alien repulsor lift technology to defy what physics itself should have demanded. Conversely, the Eldar relied on illusion fields and raw, blistering speed, things the Jedi ship made up for with its ability to completely control its motion at high velocity, spinning, flipping, turning on a dime, and making a mockery of any crew which attempted to keep up with it. Though he rarely had the opportunity to make his own effective attack against the swarms of Imperial craft which pursued him, Master Plo did bring about the indirect death of tens of Imperials merely by contriving to maneuver their ships into each other, overeager and aggressive pilots being all too easily lured into becoming the Jedi's weapon. Still, given enough time, with the amount of ships which pursued him, Plo Koon would have been cornered eventually. But time was not the ally of the Imperials, as the Republic soon proved. In the midst of his dodging and flying, Master Plo suddenly saw a rain of concussion missiles and blaster cannon bolts lay into his pursuers from the right, driving those which survived off as a combined force of V-Wings and Y-Wings flew in from behind and took up a familiar formation with the Jedi at their head. Not just any familiar formation, Plo realized. Smiling to himself, at least in as much as a Keldor could, Plo Koon reached for his communication controls and linked up with the ships behind him.
Commander Wolf, is that you?
The Jedi asked over the comms, getting a light laugh in response to his query. I had a feeling I'd find you flying around out here somewhere, General. Wolfpack has your back. I only wish you'd let us know earlier. Ain't our style to be the last of the party, said Commander Wolf.
Trust me, I wanted nothing more, but I could not endanger your lives and careers over a Jedi matter. That being said, fret not, Commander. There is still plenty to do before we are done here. Follow me. We have to thin out these Imperial strike wings. Once we have, we can begin crippling their larger ships. Are you ready?
Was Plo Koon's reply. Aye, General, lead the way. The clone commander affirmed loudly, the engines on all the ships flaring as they burned hot to keep up with the Jedi strike leader. Arc fighters and Y-Wing bombers proved to be the most susceptible to the Imperial attack craft, falling unless covered and protected by other, more nimble ships. On top of that, the nature of the ablative armored shells of many of the strike craft used by the Imperials rendered the medium and heavy laser cannons of the slower starfighters less effective, negating the advantage they sought to purchase by reducing their speed and relying on shields. Despite being far smaller, and still technically faster and more maneuverable than their enemy, the slower Republic fighters stood little chance against such numbers. Their shields no match for even a single burst from the Imperial weapons. The lighter ships, however, found their situations completely inverted. Already fragile to the point of being easily shot down by standard laser cannons, the extra weight and bulk that the Imperial weapons provided proved to be only a hindrance when taking them on. Additionally, the rapid-firing pace of the quick-cycling dual laser cannons used by the V-Wings, and the consistent accuracy and rate of fire provided by the tame and back KX-5 laser cannons which were mounted onto the Z-95s revealed themselves to be highly effective at shedding and shredding through the Imperial armor systems. With the help of the many Republic frigates which had come with the ambushing fleets, which provided both fire support and distraction against the hordes of Imperial craft, soon gaps began to form in their blanket defense, and Plo Koon led the Wolfpack through them, guiding and guarding B-Wings to their destinations, destroying weapons emplacements, damaging engines, and neutralizing retro thrusters as the fleet struggled to survive. All too quickly, however, the advantages bought by their ambush began to dry up. The pride of the Corps becoming one among the first casualties in what was proving to be a costly battle. And soon, the Imperial strike craft began to alter their tactics in response to the effective counters offered by the Republic fighter pilots. Instead of focusing on creating a fighter screen, the heavily armed Imperial ships began to target larger vessels instead, strafing Victory-class Star Destroyers with bolter fire and las beams, blitzing missile frigates and support craft, and targeting all Secular and Venator-class Star Destroyers with extreme prejudice. The assaults proved horrifically effective, succeeding in destroying more of the Republic vessels over time than the Republic itself could manage, even with the openings now offered to them. Despite now being free to strike at the Imperial capital ships all they wanted, doing so left their own completely exposed. And, just like that, the ambushing force was pushed into the defensive. The tactic had been a gambit, but proved itself worth every risk in the end, forcing the Republic starfighters into a frenzied defense of their larger support ships and carriers, and away from the gigantic floating cathedrals of the greater Imperial Navy. Plo knew they were only playing for time, not for victory, but even he began to wonder how much would be sacrificed for the advantage of the main fleet. However, as much as he wanted to, he could not allow the thoughts much of his present time, as he and the Wolfpack fought for survival. Plo and the wing of fighters which followed him banked around the drifting corpse of an eviscerated Victory class. The void beyond lit with fire, fighting, and the dead hulks of drifting, burning war machines. He and his men paid the scene no mind, diving straight down and intercepting a wide wing of Imperial gunships which were spitting death across the broad side of a vast Secular. The shields of the ship below flickered and flared, blocking most shots, but allowing some to get through before Plo Koon and his clones fired their own weapons, rending the enemy formation apart and then scattering to chase down the survivors. Burning, broken Fury interceptors tumbled down, smashing in blue splashes of energy against the shields below them, rolling and tearing themselves and their crews apart. Plo pulled his ship up, hunting down the fiery tails of 3 Imperial Starhawk bombers which were rushing, not to retreat, but to deploy their payloads. He groaned in frustration, firing as all 4 ships wove and ducked around the active battle all about them and the other vessels which were caught in their path. He clipped the wing of one, watching it bank away, losing control and subsequently his interest. A second bomber was destroyed a moment later, but not by him. It was rammed unexpectedly from below by a flight group of 2,000 Star Fury attack ships and the 900 V-Wings which pursued them. The Jedi Master jerked, veering and swerving to save his life, Starfighter rolling like a drill as he barely managed to brave the storm of lethal steel and laser fire, losing one of his right wing radiator panels in the process. Miraculously, he saw that the 3rd bomber had also survived, smoking and sputtering at an odd angle, and he realized in growing exasperation towards its intended target, still persisting in the attack. If they had only turned away, Plo Koon would have let them go. But they left him no choice but to continue the pursuit, veering his damaged starship in its direction and burning full blast after it. His fragile Actis starfighter rattled and screeched around him as he homed in on the Starhawk, itself now coming into range of its target, a listing, retreating Secular-class Star Destroyer. The Jedi Master jammed his large alien fingers into the triggers of his controls, opening fire with the oversized laser cannons and secondary ion cannons it bore as its forward armaments. The shots hit clean and true, blasting through and into the cabin of the large bomber, which began to spin and sputter out of control. Plo sighed and leaned forward, thinking that to be the end of it, but he was proven wrong. The failing, burning Starhawk seemed to impossibly regain control of itself, flying its entire bulk, body and payload, into the side of the Secular, detonating in an expanding molten explosion of superheated plasma. The ship could not withstand it, and soon Plo was watching helplessly as escape pods and fighters fled its burning, erupting corpse. It had been 15 minutes, and already most of the initial force the Republic had sent was destroyed or retreating into hyperspace. And then, everything got worse. As the ship crested over the exploding remains of the felled Secutor, the Jedi was greeted with the sight of their continuing vicious struggle. The chaos of dogfights, ranging from those taking place between two pilots and those small wars waged by hundreds or thousands on either side. Battleships and star destroyers lobbing the luminous blood of stars at each other. Explosions filling the searing void with varied, horrid lights. And then, the most terrible light of all spilled out across the battle zone, burning eyes, ships, and souls in its wake. A widening river of blue and white radioactive fire sawed into and devastated one of the Republic's battle groups, the one which had been rallying around the bulwark of Duro, one of the three massive mandators who had come ahead of the fleet in order to help pin the enemy down. The mandator in question had been torn nearly in half, the starboard side of the gargantuan Kuwati ship having been vaporized by the unrelenting flow of catastrophic energy. It twirled and twisted away into space, having been moving at its maximum acceleration just prior to being struck, and the Jedi Master was left stunned and dazed in the aftermath of so much death. One of the more massive Imperial vessels had just discharged a blast from some kind of absurdly enormous weapon, the power of which had far exceeded even the proportions of the huge cannon's size. While not as wide and far-reaching as the star bombs the Imperium had used against the Republic during the initial Battle of Axum, the intensity of the unleashed energy and its destructive power clearly surpassed that of even those vile weapons. Thankfully, the energy dispersed rather quickly, unfolding outward in a weakening cone, though, even so, it still claimed the lives of many, many Republic ships. And Plo Koon could plainly see that it was not done, the enormous, silver Imperial vessel twisting in the void. Wreathed in the remnant of fusion-born light it itself had expelled only moments before. It was angling itself for a new attack towards a new target. The Pillar of Order. The final remaining mandator was dueling valiantly with the very flagship of the enemy Imperials. Both ships tumbling through space like massive predators, luminescent claws of light and death locked continuously around the other. Their two-way contest was deadlocked. But that would not last if the Silver Imperial ship was allowed to fire its fusion weapon even one more time. In fact, it was likely that none of them would.
All spaceborne and attack-capable members of the Wolfpack and the 104th Battalion, report and form up on me.
Master Plo Koon broadcasted over his comms array. "Aye, sir, we're with you," was Commander Wolf's almost instantaneous response. "Holy frag! Did you see the size of that explosion? What the carking core was that?" Warthog almost yelled over his comms as he and the other clones began to navigate their way to the general. "It's bad news. That Imperial weapon could destroy an entire battle group if angled correctly," said Captain Jag.
It's worse than that. Look at your sensors. With a discharge like that, even a planet, shield and all, would be unable to withstand that kind of blast. No. I am afraid we are looking at nothing short of a planet-cracking weapon. And if we do not succeed here, then it is very likely that the Imperials will eventually turn that killing tool against a world's population, and not merely our own fleets.
The Jedi Master added, voice somber as his clones formed up behind and around him, creating a wide V-shaped wing of fighters and bombers. "So what are we going to do?" Warthog asked right afterwards, barely able to clamp down on his nerves as he did.
The only thing we can do,
said Plo Koon.
We stop that weapon from firing again. Follow my lead,
he declared, thrusting forward on his control sticks and lurching his speedy fighter into a forward advance, swiftly followed by his force of clone pilots. "Sir, if we leave to attack the enemy superweapon, we'll leave our support ships undefended," Jag sent out as they moved.
They will have to rely on other squadrons for protection until we return. However, our task is clear. We drive all the way to the Imperial ship. We must intercept it before it reaches the Pillar of Order. If we do not, the losses will be incalculable. With me, men of the 104th, for the Republic!
The Jedi responded back, the comms momentarily filling up with affirming cries as the engines on all the starfighters in the formations intensified their thrust. They sliced through the space between themselves and the speeding, enormous vessel they were attempting to intercept. Engines trailing fire in long lines behind them, like the glowing body of divine arrows, each craft composing the lethal head which would strike the Leviathan dead. And it was perhaps because of this display that they were noticed right away. 2 cruisers and several wings of Imperial attack craft visibly converging on their location. General? One of the clones sent nervously.
Do not slow down. Keep accelerating. Our ships are faster than theirs, so we can outdistance them once we get past them. Save your heavy ordnance. We will need them all to have any hope of stopping that ship.
Plo ordered through the comms. You mean if we can get past them? Warthog groaned. Hang on to your helmets, boys. We're going in, said Commander Wolf, speaking seconds before their wing of speeding starships virtually collided with the haphazard Imperial front. Blasters fired, las cannons strafed, and veritable blizzards of anti-starship missiles sped across the limited expanse between the speeding ships. Explosions blossomed across the line, starships veering, burning, turning rapidly as men screamed over the comms, dying all around him. But Plo Koon could not spare more than an instant's consideration for them, though he longed to. Yet his own survival was far from secure, and it took the pinnacle of his skill merely to remain alive. Already he had lost a quarter of the fighters following him, his ship spinning through the storm of metal and weapons fire, only the best and fastest clones able to keep up. Then, the cruisers fired. The Jedi Master had expected them to issue out enormous but concentrated blasts, such as those they had been using until now. Shots which were relatively easy to dodge for starfighters. He could not have been more wrong, as was revealed when the broadside cannons opened fire, spilling out a sudden relativistic volley of metal balls, near microscopic pellets to the ships which fired them. But the fist-sized projectiles proved far more significant to the clouds of fighters and attack craft they were fired into. Flames burst to life all around him as both Imperial and Republic craft were shredded like a flock of combustible starlings exposed to a flechette launcher. Plo twisted his controls, his precognition screaming at him mere moments before the weapons fired, spinning his ship through the shrapnel, debris and scraps spattering weightlessly across his canopy as alarms sounded throughout the Jedi's ship. His astromech droid screeched and beeped in obvious distress, its instruments indicating towards 3 wide punctures in the ship's lightweight frame. The diligent machine went to work on patching them as quickly as it could, but while Plo Koon had avoided taking damage that would destroy his craft outright, it had thoroughly disabled him, leaving him as little different from the surrounding death and ship fragments which drifted around him. Though his acceleration controls were limp and non-responsive, his comms, sensors, and even weapons remained mostly functional.
Attack group, report in. Did anyone else make it through that?
He radioed out.
Somehow,
said Warthog. Barely holding it together, but I'm still here, General, reported Jag. Still caught up in some fighting. I'll be back around to get you soon, General, Commander Wolf reported, his voice loud and distracted as his V-Wing spun and danced between 3 Imperial survivors of the attack.
No, you and the remaining men must go ahead without us.
Master Plo began to say, with all due respect, General, I'm not leaving you, or any of my men behind. That isn't the way you trained me to command. Wolf growled stubbornly, jets burning and blazing as he opened fire, sweat pouring down his face, unable to do more than rapidly blink it out of his eyes thanks to his pressurized suit. Plo Koon sighed and sat back, eyes looking up at the speeding shape of the silver battleship. Their window to intercept growing smaller and smaller as the astromech droids and pilots of the disabled ships around them struggled to get their vessels working again. Did they really just fire into their own guys? Warthog asked a moment later. Grievous does it all the time, Jag said in response, grunting as he shifted a panel inside his ship and began to repair a partially shattered console control conduit. Yeah, but when Grievous does it, he's only shooting at droids, not his own actual men. At least, not usually. The other clone said back, himself attempting to restart his own damaged, half-functional ship.
Both he and these PSD occultists are cruel combatants. They care not at all for the sanctity of life, neither ours nor even their own.
Master Plo added. Speaking of which, those cruisers are coming back around, Jag suddenly said. Looking over his sensors array, Plo Koon saw that the clone captain was correct. The 2 cruisers having looped around after their initial pass, and coming back for one more to finish them off. Plo turned his head back towards the droid working diligently outside of his ship, attempting to repair the starfighter as quickly as it could, but not quickly enough.
Commander Wolf, I appreciate your loyalty, and I am proud that I could instill in you any measure of that which was not already present. But I am now ordering you directly. Take the half of our forces which are still intact and capable of fighting, and stop that super weapon,
the Jedi Master said sternly through the comms. General, I can't just... the clone began to say.
You can, and you must, Commander. Our forces are already depleted, and there is nothing you can do here. If you are still present when they fire their second volley, you will be torn apart, just as much as we will. Go, Wolf! Save the offensive!
Master Plo insisted, almost pleaded. Licking bitter sweat off his lips and gritting his teeth, Commander Wolf nodded inside of the cockpit of his V-Wing. As you order, General. Survivors, follow me! the clone ordered, veering off from the now fleeing Star Furies who saw the cruisers approaching for their finishing pass.
Wolf, you can't be serious!
Warthog protested, but the commander did not hesitate with his response.
Dead serious. Everyone move, that's an order!
And with that, the majority of the starfighters and bombers which could still move swept away, forming up into a swift departure. But not all. Plo lay back, making peace with the inevitability he now faced, closing his small eyes for a brief time. He opened them a moment later when he felt and heard something bump and rustle against the hull of his starfighter. There, anchoring a magnetic cable to the front of his craft, was Warthog, floating dangerously in space as he performed the task almost one-handed. When he finished, he looked up and waved at the Jedi General from outside Plo Koon's Actus II, his other hand lightly clutching the now anchored cable.
Warthog, what are you doing?
Plo asked through the comms, watching as the clone turned around clumsily and began to pull his weightless body back up and along the drifting cable, which led all the way back up to the clone's drifting, sparking V-wing.
Well, I can't. Just leave you drifting out here, General.
The clone grunted as he climbed back onto, and then into his own ship, starting it up.
Besides, I still owe you for that time on Felucia,
he said as he pushed up the throttle on his ion engines, only one of the two activating fully and lurching forward, pulling first his ship and then the Jedi's into a shaky but speedy forward advance.
Hold on tight, General. Afraid it's gonna be a bumpy ride,
the clone added, wreckage and body parts bouncing off the two escaping craft, Plo's own ship flailing and spinning disorientingly as it trailed behind the other. Looking around, the Jedi could see that they were making good progress, but not good enough, the two cruisers sliding up alongside them.
Warthog, your ship is damaged. I am slowing you down the only way.
The Jedi began.
Save it, sir. I've already chosen my hand,
he said, arms jerking as he attempted to keep the line straight while avoiding the largest pieces of drifting metal.
All that's left now for either of us is to see how it plays out,
he finished as the shadows of the massive cruisers fell over them. The Jedi Master would nod his head, leaving his hands over his ship's controls as he closed his eyes again and waited. He felt himself cooling under the darkness brought on by the two enemy Leviathans, and hoped that he had gotten his men far enough to finish the task, making peace with death for a second time. And, for a second time, he was surprised to find himself still fully within the grips of life. He could almost hear the rumbling of the powerful cannons, could nearly feel the heated breath of their weaponized payloads as they fired. And certainly, through the Force, he could sense all of these things transpiring. Yet nothing pierced his ship, nor Warthogs, nor even the broken scraps of vessels which drifted around them. He opened his eyes and looked to his right, and saw there not what he expected to see. In place of the void of space and the battle, wreckage, and cruisers which should have been lingering within it, close at hand, there was instead a vast wall of metallic scrap. He blinked his eyes behind his goggles and looked up and down the length of it, trying to understand what exactly he was even looking at. The answer came over his comm system. "Looks like you could use a break, General," said the voice of Admiral Spikes. Plo Koon looked directly up and saw there the 6 Victory-class Star Destroyers which lingered above his ship, each of them angled and poised to allow their tractor beams the best possible hold on the metallic slice of the Mandator II they were using as a shield.
"Thank you, Admiral. That is very much appreciated,"
said the Keldor Master, elation filtering into his modulated voice. Ahead of them, one of the cruisers suddenly burst through the metal wall, ramming and ripping its way into their sight and opening fire, though with larger, solid shells as opposed to the scattering shots it had been employing against the starfighters. The spaceborne slugs tore through the vacuum, striking down 2 Victory-class Star Destroyers in the process. 12 other Star Destroyers which had been following in the Admiral's wake pouncing on it at once, hammering it with full volleys of turbo laser fire. They bludgeoned and beat it away as Admiral Spikes personally offered up his hangar for their use. Plo Koon appreciated the offer, but took only some quick, mild repairs and resupply, just enough to get going again before taking off. Jag and Warthog, both stuck with disabled or impaired vessels, hopped into a fresh Y-wing in order to keep up with the Jedi. But they were not alone. Master Plo, I'm not sending you out there without some backup. Don't worry, you can thank me later, said Admiral Spikes to Plo Koon, just as the latter departed the hangar bay. General Plo, we've really gotta stop meeting on missions like this, said a familiar voice over the Jedi's comm.
Broadside, is that you?
Asked Master Plo. Me and the rest. You got Shadow Squadron back on your flank, General. Just lead the way, he said in response. Behind Plo's patched-together Actus fighter, a whole line of upgraded V-Wing fighters and stripped-down, sped-up Y-Wing bombers had formed. Nearly all of them veteran members of Shadow Squadron. If the Kaldor could smile, he would have.
That is good to hear. Our objective is the Imperial superweapon. Our window will be tight, and we expect heavy resistance. With any luck, Commander Wolf and the others have already succeeded in disabling the weapon. But, if not, then that task will fall to us. Save your rockets and explosive munitions. We will need it all to even stand a chance at accomplishing our task,
he instructed, increasing his shaking Jedi starfighter to full speed. Piece of cake. You know our motto, minimum casualties, maximum effectiveness, said Broadside.
Temper your eagerness, Captain. The Imperial superweapon is like nothing we've ever encountered before,
was the Jedi's warning response. Broadside affected a scoff, though in truth, he was fully focused. General Plo Koon, in case you've forgotten, superweapons are our specialty, he said back, flicking off a few burn limiters inside of his cockpit and speeding up to cruise alongside the General's Actus II. Together they all burned for the interception point, the Imperial battleship hurtling through the void like a silver lance. Before them rose a legion of escorts, attack craft, and even another cruiser. But Shadow Squadron approached undaunted, knuckles white on their controls. Yet, before they made contact, hails of fire and attention-drawing death splashed against the Imperial flanks. Republic ships drawing in and around them, luring the imps off and away as Admiral Spikes sent out orders to support Plo Koon's assault. They lost more than a few ships in the resulting clash, but Shadow Squadron earned the moniker that was their namesake, slipping past the majority of the Imperial opposition and into clear view of the new, disturbingly close Imperial super weapon and the ship which bore it. Its surface was markedly smoother and more heavily plated than that of the other Imperial vessels, lacking buttresses, arches, and many of the ornaments which regularly wreathed their combat ships. It had virtually no windows, no open or exposed hangar bays, or even obvious airlocks. Very nearly everything about the ship was austere, with everything right down to its weapon emplacements being fitted tightly into its armored hull, providing far fewer obvious weak points. As they came in closer and closer, the Jedi saw bright lights and burning trails streaking up and down the length of the ship, and soon recognized that it was Commander Wolf and the survivors, or rather, those who were left. They were engaged with several squadrons of Imperial attack craft, dipping and diving around the body of the massive battleship in their attempts to fight themselves free.
Fall in and back them up!
the Jedi Master ordered, banking in towards the Imperial superweapon and leading a sudden assault on the attack craft which were attempting to snuff out the Wolfpack and their brothers. Phew! Boy, am I happy to see you, General! Commander Wolf rasped from the flickering, faltering form of his torn-up V-Wing.
As I am to see you, Commander. But there is no time for pleasantries. We need to neutralize this weapon immediately. What can you tell us?
Right, well, I've got a few theories on where we can hit them that my group didn't get the chance to. But General, you should know we've been wailing on this thing for almost 3 minutes now, and we've not made a single dent in it, the clone said in response.
That is unexpected. My senses are detecting no shield protecting it.
The Jedi began to say. It's not the shield, sir. It doesn't seem to use any. It's the armor. It's as hard as fracking Ferk metal. And I haven't been able to spot a weakness in it so far. The commander interjected.
Regardless of whatever this ship is made of, we must try. Send the coordinates you believe are most vulnerable, and I will lead us to where we should strike. Hurry! Time is short as it is,
said Master Plo, quickly leading Shadow Squadron around the 8-kilometer vessel, hunting for any weakness, any flaw. They found that the silvery hull was pitted and scarred by countless previous attacks from past battles. And they did manage some success in damaging the craft when they fired their proton torpedoes and concussion missiles into the deepest of those scars. Or when they focused fired them into the turreted guns which dotted the ship. But none of those wounds were enough to even slow the vessel down. Firing their munitions into its main engine cones did little, the heat and plasma being blasted out acting as shields of their own, and detonating anything they shot at them well before they made contact with the machinery. General, radiation levels are spiking, radioed Jag from his Y-Wing turret. As the report came in, the fighters and bombers finished another attack run, overshooting the Imperial warship and coming around for another pass. Each ship following closely behind the Jedi who led them. Even from here, Plo Koon could see the light building beneath the dreadnought, and beginning to radiate out from the enormous barrel of its weapon. 80 seconds until effective range of the Pillar of Order is reached. General Plo, there is nothing more we can do. We have to get out of here, yelled Commander Wolf.
We cannot. We have not yet defeated their weapon.
The Jedi insisted almost desperately. Sir, when that thing fires, it's going to melt anything smaller than a frigate that is anywhere near it. We can't stop it from firing again if we're melted within the next 50 seconds. We need to go, the commander insisted right back. Plo Koon knew Wolf was right, but knew also that there was one more place, one more line of attack they had not tried.
Go. Take the men out of here, Commander. There is one last attempt I must make. One last weak point we have not struck yet,
the Jedi said somberly. At first, Wolf was puzzled, but then, seeing the light starting to emanate from the barrel of the weapon, he suddenly realized what Master Plo was planning. General, you won't survive flying into the weapon barrel of that thing, especially not now, he argued, seeing that the Jedi was already angling his ship and speeding for that direction.
Perhaps not, but the Republic shall survive,
was Plo Koon's even response.
Go now, Commander. I have chosen my path,
he assured. Wolf said nothing, thinking for just a moment before nodding and contacting the other ships in their formation, and particularly Warthog and Jag's shared Y-Wing. They looked across at Wolf through their canopies and nodded back to him, all of their ships easing back and off of Master Plo's blazing trail. I understand, but I can't let you do that, General, said Commander Wolf. Wolf flicked the pinger on his control console and gave the signal. The captain, all the way in his Y-Wing, received it and did as they had agreed. Calmly, methodically, Jag adjusted the power settings on the ion turret he had control of, and opened fire. The blue bolt sailed true, smacking into the back of Plo's Actis II starfighter, shutting its systems down almost instantly, and sending it spinning out of control. Before it could lose all of its standard direction, however, Wolf and one other V-Wing pilot fired magnetic grappling cables into the ship, pulling it up and away from any potential crash.
What do you think you are doing?
Plo Koon sent to them over his faltering comms array. Saving your life, General. Don't worry, I had Jag lower the output of those ion blasts. By the time that thing fires again, you should be back online. Then we can hit the barrel of that weapon without losing any more Jedi, said Commander Wolf, he and the ship helping him tow the General banking away from the Imperial vessel. The rest of the squadron following after them. Almost the rest. A few moments later, Wolf looked down at his control panel and realized that one ship had not turned away with the others, and was still on Plo Koon's original course. It was Warthog and Jag. Hey, what are you two doing? Get back in formation! Wolf ordered. No can do, Wolf. Got a payload with the enemy's name on it, and I aim to deliver, said Warthog. That's a suicide mission, Warthog, and we just agreed that we don't send our people on those. Wolf contested angrily. No, Commander. We agreed we wouldn't send the General. Not that we wouldn't send anyone at all. The Jedi's right. We have to stop this thing from firing even one more time. I figure if a Y-Wing flying up its nose with a cargo full of protons doesn't do it, nothing will, said Jag. The Y-Wing spiraled before the front of the speeding silver warship, its shields glimmering against the radiation as it twirled in space briefly before diving down into the mouth of the cannon at full speed. Wolf, tell the General we're even now! Yelled Warthog over the comm system, his hands gripping tight the controls before him, his face fixed into a manic, spin-eyed rictus of reckless death drive. Damn it! Jag! Wolf began to say. I've got no last words, Commander, except this. Live to fight another day, brothers. Win, and live to fight another... Jag's words were bitten short by a sudden, odd flash. A flash so bright that it shone through the body and armor of the weapon, though only dimly to those outside the ship. The city-sized engine blocks of the Imperial vessel sparked and died. The warship, which had just previously been manifest as a silver lance, driving straight towards its target, now drifting and turning oddly in space while maintaining all of its momentum. The gun seemed to fire, spewing forth a misaligned torrent of red and blue energy, which lasted only a quarter as long as the first blast had, before sputtering to a stop. The discharge was enough to thrust the ship in a new, unstable direction, jarring the entire vessel from its high-speed approach as its fusion breath sputtered and coughed. Then, in the final moments, the blast resumed its discharge, strafing randomly across the battlefield, melting friend and foe alike as it grew brighter and brighter. Its energy output even exceeded its previous firing, blinding eyes across both fleets before finally bursting the very cannon of the ship, spreading radioactive flames and corrosive energy in an unwieldy arc across its keel. Then, in one final death roar, its powerful fusion generator detonated in a spectacular ball of green and red fire, once more shoving the vessel off into a new direction. It was a testament to the toughness of the ship that it remained intact throughout it all, its underslung weapon being torn to bits, as was its attached generator. But moments after the violent explosion of its main power source, lights flicked back to life across its length. The wounded Imperial Dreadnought now limping on a quarter of its engine stacks away from the battle zone. At first, Wolf wondered why it was not chased down immediately, but looking around, it was easy to see why. The Republic battle group which had arrived to hold down the Imperium were all but done for. Over 80% of their assembled power now burning in space or fleeing the field even more urgently than the battleship they had just struck. If it had fired, if it had managed to blast properly, Wolf realized, then it really would have been the end of what little they had left. Jag's last words echoed in the clone commander's mind, and for a moment, he truly wondered if any of them would be able to do as Jag had desired. Then, as if by divine will answering a silent prayer, Wolf, Plo Koon, and all of the other surviving members of the assembled squadrons watched as the burning, blistering void of space around them was suddenly filled with the glimmering steel bodies of the Republic fleet. Finally, they had arrived. Their mission, despite their losses, was a success. Once more, those final words echoed in Wolf's mind, and he grinned as he watched wave after wave of Republic battleships dropping out of hyperspace. Not only over the immediate fleet battle, but behind the enemy fleet as well, closer to the planet of Axum. Wolf clenched his controls, rallying the survivors of the assault and beginning to lead them back towards one of the newly arrived secutors. All the while muttering under his breath, "We will, Jag. We'll win, and we'll live. You're damn right we will."
This is how it's gonna be. This is what you think of me. It's going down like I told you. This is how it's gonna be. I'll be the last man standing here. I'm not going anywhere. It's going down like I told you. I'll be the last man standing here. I'm gonna rock you. I'm gonna rock you. I'm gonna rock you. I'll have you begging for mercy, begging for mercy. Oh, I'm dangerous. So dangerous. I'm dangerous. So dangerous. I'm the baddest mother up in here, and I'm about to make it clear. It's going down like I told you. I'm the baddest mother up in here. I'm gonna rock you. I'm gonna rock you. I'm gonna rock you. I'll have you begging for mercy, begging for mercy. Oh, I'm dangerous. So dangerous. I'm dangerous. Get ready, 'cause here I come. I'm about to come and get me some. Hot as a smoking gun. So get ready, 'cause here I come. I'm gonna rock you. I'm gonna rock you. I'm gonna rock you. I'll have you begging for mercy, begging for mercy. Oh. I'm dangerous. So dangerous. I'm dangerous. So dangerous.
of the lessons that we learned.